in trouble. He's going to be sacked. No, gets away. He runs, gets away again, goes to the 40, gets away again, to the 35, cuts back at the 30, to the 20, the 50, the 10. He dives. Touchdown, 49ers.
Thank God he got out of there.
Looked like he was going to be dropped for a loss.
He's going to make a first down.
It was a just miraculous play. I don't even remember what the down and distance was.
And he got another 10 yards.
Rolling off guys and just keep going. And
now we can kick a field goal.
This is a great run right here.
Now he's going to wait a minute.
He can't possibly stay up one more yard, and did.
Was that the one he ran out of gas?
Never say die. Steve, never say die young.
It was so prototypically Steve.
He and I ran out of gas about the same time. If it had been a 10-yard longer run, he wouldn't have made it, and I probably wouldn't have made it either.
And then I see Steve going in the end zone.
And he'd go all the way for a touchdown. Just amazing.
I just thought it was one of the great moments I've ever seen in football.
As it turns out, the 49ers would beat the Minnesota Vikings on that Sunday afternoon at Candlestick Park by 3 points and go on to win the Super Bowl. The play would serve as one of the most memorable ever by an NFL quarterback. But for John Stephen Young, it would serve as a metaphor for his entire career. He had to scramble for every inch of respect, and the openings didn't come easy. Steve didn't come into the NFL polished and coached to perfection. To tell you himself, he was always a work in progress. A role model and a true gentleman both on and off the field, Steve Young played with incredible courage and determination. It was always his vow to prep, suit up, and play the best game he could. From his days in Pop Warner to the glory years of the 49ers, Steve kept that promise. Good evening, I'm Mark Ubanias, and tonight we pay tribute to Hall of Fame newcomer Steve Young. A true inspiration, a comedic pitchman for Northern California Toyota. He's the All-American family man, and oh yes, he just happens to be one of the finest quarterbacks ever to play the game. In the heart of the Utah Valley sits the idyllic town of Provo, embraced by a circle of giant mountain ranges and home to more than 100,000 people. Provo is a colorful place, from its proud display of Old Glory on Main Street to the spectacular natural beauty that's within a stone's throw of town. Provo is Utah's third largest city and probably the best kept secret in the country. There's plenty of outdoor recreation, and it's a nice place to cool your heels. Provo was voted the #1 least stressful mid-sized city in the nation, making it a perfect vacation spot for someone who played football with a driving passion.
Our lives together now are really about kids and family and starting new. The one good thing about football career stopping and then marriage and family is that you don't have to, there's not all the complications of trying to catch up on all the relationships and football. My life transitioned.
Today, far from the media spotlight that dogged him for so many years, Steve and his family enjoy quality time on their Utah ranch, raising Arabian horses and just hanging out with family. Shortly before he left football, he met the former Barbara Graham on a blind date that took 10 years to set up.
A friend of his wanted to set us up back in 1989, and I said, absolutely not. He explained who he was and what he did, and I just had these preconceived ideas about athletes and guys with money and, men with too many toys want to play.
Stephen was so intense even in playing NFL that it was anybody around him. I mean, we didn't want to be around him.
He sometimes says, oh, I wish that I'd been married and had my family when I was playing. But then I remind him that football for him was a jealous mistress. And he may not have had such a happy marriage as he does now.
In March of 2000, on the big island of Hawaii, Barb and Steve said aloha to the bachelor life. Even a couple of relieved old teammates showed up to make sure the forward pass of Steve to Barb went off without a hitch. The bride and groom exchanged marriage vows during a fairy tale wedding in front of family and friends.
It is good that I got to see him afterward when he's, a whole person and not, so freaked out by everything that was going on with the press and the people around him and the pressure and everything.
We didn't come into marriage kind of like easy going. I mean, it was fast and furious, and I appreciate her willing to hang in there with me.
Since then, the Youngs have welcomed Braden Stephen and Jackson Graham into their lives.
My little one, we nicknamed him Chuck because he throws everything, He throws the ball better than I did when I was in high school, but yeah, Dad played, but I don't need them to be great at football or sports or anything to make me feel better. My kids don't need to go to Hall of Fame, be successful, they don't have to play sports. So I'll watch myself because I'll want them to be great, but I'll take my dad's theory. I think that's a pretty good start on things. That's my life today. It's a good life. It's not a hassle at all.
Next, the most humiliating day in Steve's life.
I'd rather you come kiss me than do that.
Plus, what kind of kid becomes a Hall of Famer? Meet Steve's parents and find out when the Toyota tribute to Steve Young continues.
Young almost falls down, throws to the end zone. Somehow, some way, Niners will win it.
Steve Young's Greatest Plays is sponsored by your Toyota dealers. Toyota, moving forward.
His parents say they could tell from about the age of 3 that Steve had the makings of a great young athlete. What kind of kid was Steve Young? Fred Inglis travels to Utah and Connecticut to find out.
Behind every great athlete, you'll find dedicated parents. Well, guess who just moved into the neighborhood?
Grit was the disciplinarian, and I was the kind of the monkey in the middle, making everything happen. I was the orchestrator, making life comfortable.
LeGrand and Sherry Young's recipe for raising great kids is simple.
I made cookies, and Grit was fierce.
Sherry was a substitute teacher. LeGrand was a star running back and linebacker at BYU, then supported his family as a corporate lawyer. Everyone calls him Grit, and for good reason.
He grew up in the Depression, just down the street here in Provo, and he didn't have two nickels to rub together, so he was brought up in a culture that you didn't waste things, you worked hard, you got paid for what you did, and you went home and you took care of things at home. I mean, it's just very fundamental. And I really appreciate that upbringing because it had a lot of great things in it.
Recently, they sold the family home in Connecticut and moved to Utah, about a half a mile away from Steve and Barb.
I took Sherry away from her family 35 years ago, and I'm making it up now. This is her house. This isn't my house. She lets me stay.
So who takes credit for the genes that created a Hall of Famer?
When people ask Grit, especially if they knew him, they'll say, your wife must be a great athlete because we remember you, right? and so he tells them that...
said that more than
yeah, and so he always tells them that I was the fastest girl in town.
On October 11th, 1961, in Salt Lake City, Grit and Sherry welcomed their first of 5 children.
He could dribble a basketball around 2, and most kids can't do that, and he could do push-ups. So I knew he had some coordination there.
When Steve was 8, Grit was transferred to the East Coast. The family took up stakes and moved to Greenwich, Connecticut. In this modest house, in this quiet, picturesque suburb, Steve Young spent his formative years. Located about 30 miles from downtown Manhattan, right on the Long Island Sound, Steve's childhood was spent in a Leave It to Beaver meets Ozzie and Harriet neighborhood. A neighborhood anyone would jump at the chance to grow up in or raise a family. But one fateful day on this, the home field of the North Mianus Cowboys, a quick and shifty wide receiver's world changed forever.
I'm 8 years old, and we're just little league kids, and we're playing Sears helmets and Levi's. I'm the running back. I go around and the kid from the neighborhood hits me on the neck and knocks the wind out of me.
When I saw this young boy neck tackling Steve, I could see me. Well, not only was I worried about Steve, but I could not handle a kid with a broken collarbone.
When that happens the first time, you think you're going to die. So I'm writhing on the ground, and so my dad comes out quickly and pulls my pants up, to give me some air. That's what you do, and I see my mom come out.
First, I guess I went to Grit, who did nothing. So then I went to the referee, and so when that didn't happen, the next time the kid did it, I walked out on the field.
I told my dad, tell her to go back. Tell her to go back. Well, she didn't even get close. She almost stepped on me as she headed for the kid that tackled me.
And I picked him up and I said, don't neck tackle.
Grabbed him by the shoulders and kind of looked at him sternly, don't you ever hit my son like that again. I was like, I'd rather you come kiss me than do that.
Steve was born in Salt Lake City, but he grew up right here in Greenwich, Connecticut, where he was a three-sport star for the Greenwich High Cardinals. And while this is a very affluent community, Steve played quarterback with a blue-collar mentality. At Greenwich High School, Steve went on to become co-captain of 3 sports his senior year, while earning a 4.0 average. Although he played baseball and basketball, there was no doubt Steve was partial to pigskin. Mike Ornato was the Cardinals' varsity football coach, and he'll tell you without a doubt that even back in high school, Steve Young was the real deal.
He was our best athlete. He could throw. He could throw pretty well, despite what he says. There was despite the rumor out there that we didn't throw in high school. I called all the plays, and we called a lot of passing plays that turned into running plays. Trust me. Okay.
All I remember in high school years was having all my teammates yell, "Pitch it, pitch it!" I was like, nah, I don't think I'm going to pitch it. I think I'll keep it.
Steve was lightning fast on his feet, and with Ornato's option offense, Steve was right at home. He could run right, run left, and he had an unbelievable ability to slip past the defense. Steve would rise to the next level sooner than he anticipated. As an All-State senior, Steve rushed for 13 touchdowns and led the Greenwich Cardinals to the county championship game. Steve's dad contends his legs got him there, but if you ask Steve, Coach Ornato had a lot to do with his early success.
He was a great football coach. We had a great heritage at Greenwich High, and I thought that was an important piece of the puzzle too, because you got to have a good program. Football's the ultimate team game. If you don't have a good group of guys around you, good coaching, you're not going to have a career. Because if you don't, you're not going to thrive enough to get to that next level. You need coaching.
We worked hard. We worked really hard with Steve, his junior and senior years, developing his skills. And I think if I showed you some tape, you'd recognize the fact that he was a player when he went to Brigham Young. He was a player. Brigham Young didn't know what they were getting at the time.
Brigham Young University is named after Steve's great-great-great-grandfather, head of the Mormon Church and architect of one of the largest faith-based migrations to the West. Salt Lake City is home to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which currently boasts a membership of nearly 12 million devotees worldwide. It's also home to the Grammy Award-winning Mormon Tabernacle Choir, famous for weaving intricate motifs of harmony with the same precision as Steve's zigzag patterns downfield.
The LDS Church is all about family, and it's your parents and teaching you good principles and you living up to, higher standards and stuff. Those fundamentals are really important, else you can get lost in what the expectations are and what people are expecting of you. And so those fundamentals, in church have been really key to me, no question.
Neither expectations nor a family connection did anything to buy Steve an easy ride on the BYU football team. Truth is, it would end up being a litmus test, whose outcome would predict Steve's ability to overcome tremendous obstacles in the shadow of greatness and find his own place in the sun.
When I showed up on campus, no one cared, and when I replaced Jim McMahon, no one really knew. You'd think Steve Young, Brigham Young, no one really cared, And it was rough because Jim really was, at that point, had the greatest college career of any quarterback in history. I just walked into it, and I didn't know how I was going to get through it.
When I think of Steve, I just think of a guy that just took what he had, maximized his abilities to the fullest, and overcame a lot of obstacles to accomplish what he did, and did it very well.
Head coach Lavelle Edwards is one of college football's foremost teachers of the pro-style passing attack. Under his leadership, the Brigham Young Cougars led the nation in passing offense 8 times. When he retired after the 2000 season, Cougar Stadium, with press boxes so immaculate they're nicknamed the Provo Marriott by the media, was renamed Lavelle Edwards Stadium in his honor. Coach Edwards was responsible for recruiting Steve to play for BYU. After reviewing films of his high school games, his initial thought was that Steve, because of his incredible speed, would make a great safety.
I came onto campus at BYU. They were throwing the ball like crazy. Everybody wanted to play quarterback at BYU. So I show up. I didn't even know how to really throw the ball. And so they put me on a scout team, and I was, running scout squad.
Steve wanted a legitimate shot at the quarterback spot, but that was not to be. One obstacle was quarterback great Jim McMahon. The other was something Steve didn't anticipate.
We had a great quarterback coach at that time, a guy named Doug Scoville. And Doug was an outstanding quarterback coach. And Doug didn't think the kid could ever be a quarterback at BYU because he never dropped back and threw a pass ever in his life. And the first few they'd draw back, he'd have a hard time hitting that window over there.
Doug Scoville had told me, I don't coach lefties. Okay, well that's not good because I'm not righty,
At the end of the season, Edwards traditionally interviewed each player and said, where are you, and this is where we think you are. And he interviewed Steven, and he says, you're never going to play quarterback here. If you want to play for this team, you got to switch to defensive back.
Oh, I'll wing it and see how it goes. And about 3 weeks into it, I'd had it. I was like, this is ridiculous. I called my dad, and I said, Dad, they don't even know my name. I'm getting pummeled, and this is stupid. I should have gone to North Carolina. This is, I'm coming home. I'm quitting.
He called home and checked about it, or he just said he just wanted to quit.
He said, look, you can quit, but you can't come home. Because I don't live with quitters, he said.
That is a true story. I mean, you have to psych these kids out a little bit,
But Steve went back, even though he was 8th in the depth charts. That's not warming the bench. That's carving your initials on it.
He just took that as a challenge, and on his own, he did all these other things to make himself literally into being a very good drop-back quarterback.
Jim was he was a pure thrower, and I had learned to throw from Jim. I actually went to college and hadn't learned to throw the football. And by watching him, like Phil Mickelson watched his dad, lefty and righty, I was the 8th string quarterback, so no one cared, but I was over on the sidelines, and I would just follow Jim, and then started throwing. I was like, oh, you throw the ball like this. Because I used to spin it, I was like, no more. You throw it, oh, and once I learned it, not only could I throw it, I was accurate. That was one of my greatest. I was like, oh, you want me to hit that flea? No problem.
Typical of Steve Young.
Doug Scoville leaves for San Diego State. Ted Tollner comes in, and he's got fresh eyes. He's just looking, and I'm back there at the end of practice. I'm throwing the ball, and so he goes into Lavelle and says, Lavelle, what do you do with Steve Young? Oh, he's too fast. He's going to DB. I think you ought to. He's throwing the ball pretty well. You ought to see if he. No, he's doing it. Well, why don't you let him have 2 weeks? And Ted Tollner begged for 2 weeks. He got those 2 weeks from Lavelle, and the rest is history.
As a senior, Steve led BYU on an 11-game winning streak. It was during the Holiday Bowl against Missouri that a receiver coach sent in a harrowing play that had everyone shaking their heads in amazement.
I told Norm Chow that that was the dumbest call in the history of football.
No timeouts remaining for Brigham Young. 51,000 plus here. Brigham Young with the ball. First down. Back to throw. Play flicker. Intended for Young. At the 15. At the 10. At the 5. He's gone. Oh! Touchdown. The impossible play, and Brigham Young has done it again.
And the team finished the season with a victory in the Holiday Bowl, beating Missouri 21-17.
A kid either has that or he doesn't have it, and that guy had it. And that's why he's in the Hall of Fame.
I think that was the lesson. That prepared me for what I didn't know at that point, for what was coming, because a much bigger stage was going to happen.
Next, Steve's baptism of fire.
I'd rather do a lot of other things than play football under those conditions.
The LA Express of the fledgling USFL wanted to sign Steve to a $40 million lifetime contract. But as super agent Lee Steinberg tells Joe Fonzie, that was Steve's dream come true, and his worst nightmare all rolled into one.
Steve didn't want to play in the USFL. All he ever wanted to do was play in the NFL. He'd had Roger Staubach's picture over his bed, and so he just said, "Tell him no, Lee." So that's a simple negotiating technique. Even I can master that one. So I kept saying, no, no, no. Every time I said no, Don Klosterman increased the package. And it kept going up. It was $10 million, 15, 20, 25, 30. All of a sudden, we're at $40 million for 4 years. And oh my goodness. Until he is old and gray, he's got security simply from playing for 4 years. And I think that's a crucial and a critical factor.
Before the ink was dry on his contract, everybody was talking about the $40 million man. It was major news. It was even covered by one very young, familiar face.
The USFL has quite a few kinks to work out, but they are certainly making news with their off-the-field spending habits. Today, Steve Young gets to wear the crown as richest athlete in history.
I just remember his picture being on the front page of the New York Daily News, holding up the jersey they gave him and or a check for the millions of dollars. I was thinking, it's smart Steve. Mamma mia, you know?
And the money thing just drove him nuts. I mean, when he got that check from the USFL, it was like $2 million bonus check, sat in his drawer for weeks. I said, "Where's that check?" "Oh, don't worry about it, Pop." He just didn't want to deal with it.
That was him.
I mean, the money he's lost in interest and stuff like that is just unbelievable. He was never about money.
Even as the check sat uncashed, Steve focused on playing the best football he could. In his first season with the Express, Steve became the first player in pro football history to rush for 100 yards and pass for 300, all in the same game. But there was growing concern that the league wasn't living up to its pro football status. And worse yet, it wasn't going to survive another season.
They didn't provide a ride to the game for them. They had to drive their own cars to the games, and didn't have towels, and I mean, it was such a bad deal. He said, "I'm out of here. I got to get out of here."
Now he's playing in this absolutely ludicrous situation, so it had to have an impact on him. But you knew that he always gave it his best, no matter what. It didn't matter. He would play as hard as he possibly could.
It was just this side of a high school game, because we could walk up and down the sidelines. I mean, I think we could have interviewed people during the game if we wanted to. And Lee Steinberg's walking up and down the sidelines. And he said, this kid here, this Steve Young, you got to see him. He's really something.
It was time for Steve to make his move into the NFL. But what on earth could be worse than the LA Express?
We negotiated a buyout of his contract with the USFL and went ahead and signed a contract. Hugh Culverhouse told him, "Steve, Tampa Bay will be your final destination. We've got a growing great franchise. This will be an awesome place for you because Florida is bursting at the seams." Now what transpired was that they failed to sign Bo Jackson, who was their first draft pick, and they had really one of the worst offensive lines and supporting cast maybe in the history of football.
I played for the Buccaneers when there were fights in the locker room, and it was an awful situation to play football in. And football is the ultimate team game, and we were showing everyone in the world how you don't do it.
He couldn't get over that guys came to the game and just said, "How much are we going to lose by?" It was the attitude.
Everybody was protecting their back. Everybody cared about themselves only. And I mean, by definition, a quarterback has to be sharing the ball, making things happen, passing the ball, giving it to other people. There has to be kind of a communication between the teammates and so forth. There was none of that.
Yeah, the franchise at that time was horrible, stayed horrible for years. And so now here he is. He's gone from the LA Express, which is just a monstrous situation. Now he goes to one of the teams regarded as among the absolute worst in football. And he's trying to make something of that. And he's probably thinking at that point, am I ever going to be rescued? Is there any way that this is ever going to turn around for me?
I'd rather do a lot of other things than play football under those conditions.
But '86, he ran for his life. And one of the great highlights is Steve being thrown to the turf in Green Bay. He comes up out of the snow, and you cannot see his face. You can only see snow, ice, and at that point the question is, will he suffocate before they get a ice pick to take him out of this? And so at this point, it's really hard to evaluate who Steve Young is in terms of his talent base, because he is sacked mercilessly. He's running for his life at all points. He has no supporting cast. And the glorious future that Hugh Culverhouse has described is brought to an abrupt halt when Vinny Testaverde becomes available in the 1987 draft, and Hugh Culverhouse informs us that he's going to make him the first pick in the draft.
A moment of disappointment turns into the chance of a lifetime. Time and tide would deliver Steve Young to his ultimate destination, where he was about to come face to face with the deity, reconcile the past, and find peace with destiny.
Next, Steve Young faces the greatest challenge of his career.
They both knew that it wasn't going to last too long with two great quarterbacks on one team.
There's only one job, both of them wanted it.
As soon as Steve made it to the pros, it wasn't long before Hollywood came knocking. Endorsements were flying in from everywhere, but just like his football career, it took Steve just a few tries to get it right.
Picking up the blitz is one of the toughest things I had to... Let me do that. Giving up drugs is one of... Well, yeah, you're real tough for that sesame seed walk. Sesame seed walk?
But if you've been anywhere near a TV for the last 12 years, you'll know why football finally took a back seat.
It gets 55 miles per gallon. 55 miles per gallon. Hello?
There's a ton of people in the Bay Area that I run into that know me for doing Toyota commercials. They knew I played football, but those Toyota commercials in the Bay Area, that's what I'm known for today. And I think that's kind of fun.
For more than a decade, Steve has been the spokesman for Northern California Toyota. To some, it seemed like a giant leap from football to the acting world. But Steve's a natural, and like everything else he does it to perfection, even when it's at his own expense.
Oh, baby. I don't know what that even does. How to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit. How to convert centigrade to Fahrenheit. Oh, how to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit. How to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. How to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit? Fahrenheit. Can we try that one more time?
The great thing about him is he's naturally funny. He's not someone who's not funny trying to be funny, which just never works. He's a naturally funny guy, and if you sat and talked to him, you'd laugh.
I told him, look, if you just make fun of me, we'll have fun with this. And they have done great stuff, and it's like a series. Some of the people, they'll go, oh, my favorite one was the flower pot on the roof, or I love the old lady.
So really, what do you do?
I'm retired.
He doesn't really kind of stray with lines, but it's usually after he thinks the camera has stopped rolling, and he'll do something funny, and we'll end up using that.
Shoot. How's retirement treating me? Let me think about this for a second, okay?
They've just renewed me for 3 more years. I'm like the Toyota guy. I love it.
What a waste of film.
For Steve Young, Tampa Bay turned out to be a nightmare. When the Bucs had first pick in the '87 draft and had their eyes set on Miami quarterback Vinny Testaverde, Tampa Bay owner Hugh Culverhouse granted Steve one wish: to be dealt to the 49ers. Joe Fonzie got the story from a reliable source.
For Eddie DeBartolo, Montana isn't just the name of one of his ex-employees. Since giving up his interest in the 49ers, Eddie spends a good part of his time enjoying the good life in Big Sky country. Back in 1987, when Tampa owner Hugh Culverhouse was interested in trading Steve Young, Eddie took the call.
He said, let's talk about trading him. He's not in the right place at the right time. He said, he's the best athlete that I've ever seen, which I totally agree with. He said he could play running back, he can play defensive back, but more important than that, he said, you'd want your daughter to marry him.
Essentially, what Bill Walsh said to Steve was, look, Joe Montana's at the end of his career, and his back is such that he will very probably never play again.
And so then the negotiations got very, very serious.
And we dickered a little bit, and it ended up at a second, a fourth, and $1 million.
On April 24th, 1987, it was official. Steve Young was a San Francisco 49er.
And I remember the first day I walked out to practice, out came Joe jogging, you know. I was like, I remember saying to myself, he doesn't look hurt. And I remember thinking, not only does he not look hurt, he's not hurt, you know. He looks pretty good. And so that's the first time I realized that I'm in it here. I'm in trouble.
I think he would admit that Bill Walsh sold him a little bit of snake oil.
For 4 long years, Steve sat back in the shadow of Joe Montana. Things were tough for the heir apparent.
You know, they'd go on a trip to across the country or something for a game, and, you know, he'd come home and he had nobody. I mean, nobody'd meet him, and, you know, he felt very discouraged at times.
Could you imagine anything more horrific than knowing the talent level he had, being the age he was, knowing he could start for 27 other teams, having to stand there game after game after game on the sideline. When he finally got the starting job, having to hear over and over and over again, well, it wasn't good enough. Joe would have done it better. Joe would have completed every touchdown pass. Joe would have won every game. This wasn't easy.
There's only one job, both of them wanted it.
The big picture was, this is the place I know that if I hang around long enough, I'll find out how good I can get.
I really respect Steve for the way that he handled himself, because if you talk to Steve, he'll talk about learning the quarterback position through watching Joe.
When Joe Montana left for Kansas City, Steve assumed the role of starting quarterback with grace and dignity. Some of the fans, however, couldn't reconcile the loss of their hero.
I can't tell you how many times I heard fans say, well, he's a terrific quarterback, but, you know, he's no Joe Montana. He hasn't won any Super Bowls.
And yet, even though the masses were screaming for the return of the old master, he was there able to get the job done day in and day out.
This is what Steve Young was facing. He hung there because he felt there was something special about the system and the coaching, and he was right.
I gotta say, I don't know if I would want to do it any other way. It was an awesome ride.
On any given Sunday, Steve Young gave us all a reason to love the game. His passion for winning and fiery competitive spirit made for some of the most exciting moments in football.
Coming up.
He woke up that morning and says, you know, by the end of today, my life's going to be different. One way or another, it's going to be different.
Redemption and immortalization when we continue with the Toyota tribute to Steve Young.
Steve Young, Did You Know, is sponsored by Chevron with Techron, the first gasoline to be designated top tier by leading automakers.
They call me Psycho.
Psycho! That was as good of a nickname as they could get from me.
Psycho? Me? This is the Psycho!
I don't know why, but I make dumb faces when I play.
They call me Psycho.
In 1993, Steve started the Forever Young Foundation. The aim of this nonprofit is to provide resources and support to extraordinary community outreach programs which focus on ill, underprivileged, and at-risk children. The foundation funds several charities around the country. In 1996, they donated a high-tech playroom at Lucille Packard Children's Hospital in Palo Alto, California. This specialized area was created for kids who find themselves away from home in a hospital facing physical and emotional challenges. The work of the foundation brings a glimmer of hope and joy into the lives of those who need it most. January 29, 1995, Joe Robbie Stadium, Miami. Super Bowl 29 versus the San Diego Chargers. It was Steve's defining moment. If there was any time in his entire football career that he needed to prove to the world how good he really was, this was it.
He woke up that morning and says, you know, but by the end of today, my life's going to be different. One way or another, it's going to be different.
Steve wasted little time getting the team on the scoreboard. In less than 2 minutes into the game, he went 44 yards to Jerry Rice for a touchdown. Before San Diego could ask which way to the beach, Steve completed 24 of 36 passes for 325 yards. He smashed Joe Montana's 5-touchdown Super Bowl record by throwing 6 and shattered the yoke around his neck by leading the 49ers in rushing with 49 yards on 5 carries. This was Steve's day of destiny. When heroes are born, legends are made, and ghosts are laid to rest.
Someone take the monkey off my back, please! Oh, it was that gorilla!
And on that one afternoon, that one amazing game, and throws all the monkeys off his back, that was a day.
In a small town outside Provo, Utah, Blair Buswell applies his talents to a very traditional form of sculpture.
This is my Mount Rushmore, a project I'll be working on for a long time, and it's pretty darn exciting.
After 4 years of tedious work, this commissioned piece isn't even half finished. He's sculpturing a giant wagon train with a very Hitchcock twist. The babies, the young boy, the woman, people you know.
Very well. It's my family.
And you're in this.
I am. I'm the dad driving the wagon. I felt a little strange having my family taken across the plains with some other man, so I decided to put myself in it.
Working in the style of American artists such as Russell and Remington, Buswell's creations are displayed all over the world. Even so, it's not his exquisite sculptures of buffalo and stagecoaches that he's most famous for. Back in college, Buswell was a decent running back, but he didn't want to make a career out of it. As an art major, he was fascinated with capturing the human figure in poetic motion. The perfect place to do both was BYU, and that led to the privilege of lining up behind a left-handed quarterback named Steve Young.
He was a character, a lot of fun. He could make something out of nothing. His scramble ability, be able to think on his feet, you don't teach that kind of thing.
Blair Buswell's other job, when he's not wrestling with wagon trains, is to create the bronze sculptures of Hall of Fame inductees. And he got that assignment thanks to Coach Bill Walsh.
He was the guest speaker. He'd won the first Super Bowl with the 49ers, and he was a guest speaker at the Cougar Club banquet, sports banquet at BYU at the end of the year. So he came up after and asked me, he says, would you consider doing something for me? I'm looking for something to give Eddie DeBartolo that he doesn't already have. Something unique. Would you consider doing a sculpture of us? And after he picked me up off the ground, I said, sure. So they flew me back to Youngstown to give Eddie his copy. And while I was back there, they'd called up the Hall of Fame and said, you need to see this guy's work. I went over, met with the directors, and they hired me. So I've been doing it since 1983.
Buswell's carved many a famous sports figure, but this year is special.
It'll be unique in that, being a teammate, being a friend, and after doing this for all this time, I get to be a part of that induction of someone I know rather than someone I just met. So I was kind of preparing myself that this is going to happen. I'm looking forward to this. The way I do it, they either come to me here or I go to their home. And we spend a day or two together, and I go concentrate on getting the likeness where they feel comfortable, what expression they want, and to make sure that on induction day when the cloth is pulled, that they're not going to say, well, who is that? And all their friends and family are there.
Blair's done a pretty decent job so far, so much so that he was named the #1 sports artist in the country. His Hall of Fame bust can take up to 7 months to complete. He begins work on the clay sculpture first, and following revisions and final approval from the Hall of Famers themselves, the images are cast in bronze. If you look around Blair's studio, you'll find more than a few familiar faces. Blair Buswell always had a feeling he would someday be sculpting a bust for his friend Steve Young, capturing his image and freezing a moment in bronze to rest in Canton in perpetuity.
I kept teasing him along the way when we'd run into each other at different events or at the Pro Bowl or around. I say, well, if you keep this stuff up, Steve, we're going to spend some time together. You're going to be in the Hall of Fame. And he just, we had a good laugh, and but it came true.
Coming up, last stop, Canton, Ohio, and Steve's induction into the Hall of Fame. Next, when we return.
I had found heaven on earth for football.
I think when they won that game against Dallas at Candlestick, Mr. Cool, Steve Young, kind of lost his marbles. He was unstoppable. It was a Sally Field moment. You could almost see him saying, "You like me, you really like me." That was really a great moment.
Steve Young Memories is sponsored by Sprint. The Sprint PCS Fair and Flexible America Network covers more people in more places than anyone else.
After 15 years, Steve Young left the game of football with that fiery passion for competition still burning inside. On June 12, 2000, in the confines of the locker room where he showed up for work and where the minutia of football happens away from the crowds, Steve Young said goodbye.
Retiring at 38 is, in some ways, it's it sucks,
For Steve, success is a journey, not a destination. All the accomplishments, even the setbacks and disappointments, were markers in time, where patience and perseverance prevail. All Steve really wanted out of the game was to see how good he could truly be.
Today, he found out.
I knew that I was a decent player, and for some reason God blessed me with a big picture knowledge that if I was ever going to find out just how good I could get, I needed to stay in San Francisco and learn, even if it was brutally hard to do. And I had found heaven on earth for football. I love the faithful fans of San Francisco. I wanted to live up to your amazing expectations. You were the heart of it all. Thank you so very much, even for the boos that motivated me to work harder to gain your trust and confidence. No fans ever deserved it more. They were halcyon days never to be forgotten. Most of the guys have very little in common but for their passion in football. Championship football cannot be played without a sense of love and respect for your teammates. When the game starts, all our differences become unimportant. There becomes a sole focus on a common goal, and you embrace and appreciate the unique gifts people bring. It is amazing to see players rise to the level of expectation and work together for a common goal. Football is the great metaphor for life. For me, it will never again be 3rd and 10, late in the fourth quarter, down by 4 at Candlestick Park. Nothing in life can be like those great moments. But with those experiences then, and all the other good things that happened, life today is even better. With my wife Barb and my 2 sons Braden and Jackson, I have found the secret to life: loving others more than yourself. I sincerely love my family and know that being a Hall of Fame husband and dad is what will eventually define my life. Thank you, Barb, for your sacrifices for our family. Thank you to the Hall of Fame and all the great men inside. I stand on your shoulders today and hope that we collectively inspire those playing today and on into the future to live to your legacy. I am honored to join your ranks today, and more importantly, I stand to honor those in my life who made it possible. Thank you very much.
What makes Steve unique to me is his ability, just the character of who he is. Solid guy.
When he took that field, all hell broke loose.
He liberated a whole new generation of quarterbacks.
I mean, nobody plays the game like Steve Young. And to say that, well, we're going to look for another Steve Young, lots of luck.
He was the smartest quarterback ever to play football, disregarding what he knew about football.
Yeah, he was a great quarterback and absolutely a Hall of Fame.
The football statistics will speak for themselves, but his legacy really is he was a good guy. And he likes being a good guy.
He's learned a lot. I say that because I've seen where he's come from. And I'm real proud of him.
The path Steve Young chose, taking him to the Hall of Fame, has taught us something as well. How character under pressure is not something learned or taken in, it's revealed. And what's been revealed to us is that Steve Young is every bit the great player and human being he set out to be. I'm Mark Ibanez. Good night.
Travel provided by Southwest Airlines. Whether you're traveling for business or pleasure, Southwest can get you there with over 3,000 nonstop daily flights. Southwest Airlines.